I told my husband to stop grabbing me every time I walked by. Just once, I asked to be treated like a person instead of a fantasy. That was 6 months ago. Since then, he hasn't kissed me, touched me, or even looked at me like he used to. And now he says he's leaving. Because I ruined how he loved me. I'm Destiny. I'm 29, and my entire marriage just exploded because apparently asking for basic human decency makes me some kind of monster. My husband, Robert, is 31, and we've been married 3 years, together for 7 total. I genuinely thought we had this amazing relationship until 6 months ago when everything went completely sideways. Let me start from the beginning so you understand what I'm dealing with here. Robert works for some shipping company doing logistic stuff, and I handle patient scheduling at a medical clinic. We're not rich, but we're doing okay. Own our little house. Both have reliable cars. The whole suburban dream thing. On paper, Robert is exactly what every woman says she wants. He's faithful, responsible, pays his bills, doesn't gamble or drink too much, comes home every night. Sounds perfect, right? But here's what nobody tells you about the perfect husband: sometimes perfect can drive you absolutely insane in ways you never saw coming. When Robert and I first got together, I was head over heels for how attentive he was. He was constantly touching me, always had his hands on me, always telling me how beautiful and sexy I was. Every time I walked past him, he'd grab my butt or pull me in for a kiss. He'd whisper dirty things in my ear while I was trying to cook dinner. He made me feel like I was the hottest woman alive just for existing. At first, this was incredible. My friends were all jealous because their boyfriends barely noticed when they got dressed up. And here was Robert acting like I was some kind of supermodel just for wearing pajamas. He'd get turned on just from hugging me goodbye in the morning. He'd make comments about my body constantly, how good I looked in certain outfits, how much he wanted me, how he couldn't keep his hands off me. It was flattering and made me feel so desired and wanted. But somewhere around year 4 or 5, it started getting exhausting. Like really, really exhausting. I couldn't do anything without Robert making it sexual somehow. I couldn't hug him without feeling him get hard against me. I couldn't bend over to pick something up without him making some comment about my body. I couldn't even be sick with the flu without him still finding ways to touch me inappropriately. It was like he couldn't see me as anything other than a walking sex object. The breaking point was really building for months. I work in healthcare administration, which is honestly one of the most stressful jobs on the planet. I'm dealing with insurance companies, angry patients, doctors who think they're God, mountains of paperwork, constant deadlines, people literally crying in my office because they can't afford their medications. I come home mentally and emotionally drained, just wanting to exist as a human being for 5 minutes without being somebody's fantasy. But Robert would be there waiting, ready to pounce the second I walked through the door. Not in a sweet "how was your day, honey?" way, but in a "you look so hot" in that uniform way that made me want to scream. He never asked about my actual day. Never wanted to hear about the problems I was dealing with. Never offered to help with anything stressful in my life. But he sure as hell never missed an opportunity to comment on my appearance or grab some part of my body. I started dropping hints that maybe he could tone it down a little. When he'd make sexual comments, I'd change the subject or give him a look. When he'd grab my butt while I was loading the dishwasher, I'd move away and keep working. When he'd get visibly aroused during completely innocent moments, I'd make little jokes about how predictable men are. I thought he'd pick up on the fact that I needed some space, some time to just exist without being sexualized every 5 minutes. But Robert kept doing it: the constant touching, the sexual comments, the inability to have a normal conversation without making it about my body somehow. It was like he was physically incapable of seeing me as a complete person instead of just a collection of body parts that existed for his entertainment. Are men really so controlled by their hormones that they can't interact with their own wives without making everything sexual? I tried talking to my sister about it, and she just laughed and said, I was lucky to have a husband who still found me attractive after 7 years. But she doesn't understand what it's like to never have a moment where you're seen as a person instead of an object. She doesn't know what it feels like to come home from dealing with real problems all day only to be treated like a stress relief toy by the person who's supposed to support you. My coworkers weren't much help either. When I mentioned that Robert was a little too hands-on, they'd roll their eyes and say their husbands barely looked at them anymore. But that's not the point. The point is that there's a difference between feeling desired and feeling objectified. And Robert had crossed that line a long time ago. I started paying attention to how Robert interacted with other people versus how he interacted with me, with his friends, his coworkers, random people at the store. He was thoughtful and engaging. He asked questions, listened to answers, had real conversations about actual topics. But with me, everything somehow circled back to my appearance or how much he wanted me physically. It was like he'd forgotten I had a brain, opinions, feelings that weren't related to his sexual needs. 6 months ago, I was having the worst week of my entire career. Our computer system crashed, and we lost a bunch of patient files, which meant I was staying late every night trying to recover data while dealing with panicked doctors and angry office managers. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and honestly just trying to get through basic household tasks without having a complete breakdown. I was in our bedroom sorting through Robert's work shirts when he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. He started kissing my neck, which might have been sweet, except I could immediately feel him getting hard against my back. In that moment, something inside me just completely snapped. Here I was, dealing with actual crisis situations at work, barely keeping my head above water, and Robert's response was to treat me like some kind of stress relief toy. Instead of asking if I needed help or support, I turned around, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "I'm so sick of you constantly sexualizing me. It's honestly disgusting." The words came out harsher than I'd planned, but I was just done. A business trip to Dallas for a week. Usually, trips like this involved lots of texting throughout the day, phone calls before bed, both of us missing each other, and looking forward to reconnecting when he got back. But this time felt completely different. Robert seemed almost relieved to be going. And honestly, I was kind of relieved, too, which should have been a huge red flag. The week he was gone passed in this strange blur. I barely heard from him except for a few basic check-in texts about his flight and hotel. No missing you messages, no complaints about being apart, no countdown to coming home. It was like he was just living his life without me in it. And I was doing the same thing. For the first time in 7 years, we were both completely fine being separated. When Robert came back from Dallas, something fundamental had changed about him. He wasn't cold or angry, but there was this distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He unpacked methodically, answered my questions about the trip politely, and went to bed early, claiming he was exhausted from travel. The next day, he disappeared for most of the afternoon, saying he had errands to run. Sunday evening, Robert asked if we could talk, and my stomach immediately dropped because I could tell from his tone that this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. He sat down across from me at our kitchen table with this serious expression that made me want to run away and hide somewhere. "I did a lot of thinking while I was in Dallas," he started, and I felt defensive before he even finished the sentence. "About us, about our relationship, about what we both want and need from each other." He paused like he was choosing his words really carefully. "I don't think we're compatible anymore." The words felt like a physical blow, but I tried to stay calm and rational. "What do you mean we're not compatible?" I asked. "We've been together for 7 years. We've always been compatible." But even as I said it, I knew it sounded desperate and weak. Robert shook his head slowly. "We were compatible," he said. "But somewhere along the way, we stopped wanting the same things from this relationship. I want to be with someone who appreciates how I show love instead of finding it disgusting. I want to be with someone who makes me feel desired instead of making me feel like a creep for being attracted to my own wife." I started to interrupt to explain that I didn't mean it the way it had come out. But Robert held up his hand to stop me. "Let me finish," he said. And there was something in his voice that made me shut up completely. "This week in Dallas, I went to a conference mixer and there was a woman there who was flirting with me," he continued. And I felt my blood pressure spike immediately. "Nothing happened," he added quickly. "But for the first time in months, I felt like someone actually wanted me around. She laughed at my jokes, seemed interested in what I had to say, made me feel attractive and fun and worth talking to." "So, you're leaving me for some random girl you met at a conference?" I snapped, but Robert shook his head again. "I'm not leaving you for her," he said. "I'm leaving because being around her for one evening made me realize how absolutely miserable I've been for the past 6 months. I'm leaving because I remembered what it feels like to be appreciated instead of just tolerated. I'm leaving because I want to be with someone who actually wants to be with me." I felt like the ground was disappearing under my feet. "I do want to be with you," I said, but it sounded hollow even to my own ears. "I just needed you to respect some basic boundaries. I needed you to see me as more than just a sex object." "But that's the thing," Robert said. And for the first time, he sounded angry instead of just sad. "I never saw you as just a sex object. I saw you as the most beautiful, amazing woman in the world. And I wanted to show you that every single day. But you turned my love into something dirty and wrong. And now I can't even touch my own wife without feeling like some kind of predator." The accusation stung because there was truth in it. But I wasn't about to admit that to him. "I just wanted some balance," I said defensively. "I wanted to feel like you valued my mind and my personality, not just my body." "When have I ever given you any indication that I didn't value your mind?" Robert shot back. "When have I ever treated you like you were just a body? Yes, I found you physically attractive and I expressed that attraction, but that doesn't mean I didn't see you as a complete person." I wanted to argue with him to list all the times he'd made inappropriate comments or grabbed me when I didn't want to be touched, but suddenly I couldn't think of any specific examples that actually supported my point. Had Robert really been objectifying me, or had I just been uncomfortable with how intensely he desired me? "The bottom line is that we want completely different things now," Robert continued. "You want a relationship where physical attraction takes a backseat to emotional connection. I want a relationship where I can express my attraction without being made to feel ashamed of it. Neither of us is wrong, but we're definitely not right for each other anymore." I started panicking as I realized he was completely serious about this. "We can work on it," I said quickly. "We can go to counseling. We can find a compromise that works for both of us." But Robert was already shaking his head before I finished talking. "I'm not interested in working on it anymore," he said, and his voice was quiet but absolutely final. "I'm tired of walking on eggshells in my own home. I'm tired of feeling rejected and unwanted by the person who's supposed to love me most. I'm tired of having to suppress who I am just to make you comfortable." "So that's it?" I asked, and I could hear my voice getting shrill and desperate. 7 years together and you're just giving up because some girl at a conference made you feel good about yourself. 7 years together and you gave up the moment I told you my attraction to you was disgusting, Robert replied. And that completely shut me up because he was right. I had given up. I decided his way of showing love was wrong instead of trying to find a way to make it work for both of us. The next few weeks were a nightmare of tense conversations, heated arguments, and Robert's increasing emotional unavailability. I tried everything I could think of to change his mind. I offered to go to counseling, promised to be more affectionate, even suggested we take a vacation to reconnect and start over. But Robert remained completely unmoved by all of it. It's too late for that, he kept saying whenever I suggested ways to fix our problems. You can't take back what you said. You can't undo the past 6 months. And honestly, I don't want to go back to wondering if every kiss or touch is going to be criticized or labeled as inappropriate. Accused him of being unforgiving and inflexible. I told him he was throwing away something good because his ego was bruised by one conversation. I even threatened to tell everyone that he was leaving me for a younger woman, which made him laugh in a way that wasn't amused at all. Go ahead, he said. Tell them whatever version of events makes you feel better. The people who actually matter will figure out the truth eventually. That response scared me more than anything else because it meant he truly didn't care about my opinion or my version of what had happened. Within a month, Robert had filed for divorce. He moved out of our house and into a small apartment downtown, taking only his personal belongings and leaving me with everything else. The divorce proceedings were swift and relatively painless since we didn't have kids and our finances were pretty straightforward. Robert didn't fight me on anything. He just wanted out as quickly and cleanly as possible. During this entire process, I kept expecting him to change his mind, to realize he was making a huge mistake and come back to try to work things out. But Robert never wavered, even slightly. If anything, he seemed more relaxed and happier as the divorce progressed, like a massive weight was being lifted off his shoulders with each signed document. My friends and family were sympathetic but confused about the whole situation. They'd always liked Robert and thought we were happy together. When I tried to explain that he'd left because I asked him to stop sexualizing me, they looked at me like I was speaking a completely foreign language. The real devastating blow came about 4 months after Robert moved out. I was at the grocery store when I saw him in the produce section with a woman I didn't recognize. She was maybe 26 or 27, pretty in this natural, effortless way, and clearly completely comfortable with Robert in a way that made my stomach turn. I watched from behind a display of apples as Robert put his arm around her waist, and she leaned into him, both of them laughing about something on his phone screen. What absolutely destroyed me wasn't just seeing Robert with someone new. It was seeing how genuinely happy and relaxed he looked. This was the Robert the first fallen in love with 7 years ago, the one who was funny and charming and full of life. I realized that somewhere in our marriage, he'd stopped being that person around me, and I'd been too focused on my own discomfort to notice or care. The woman he was with seemed to genuinely enjoy his attention and affection. When he whispered something in her ear, she giggled and playfully pushed him away, but she didn't look annoyed or uncomfortable. When he kissed her forehead while they waited in the checkout line, she smiled like it was the absolute best part of her day. I was watching Robert be himself with someone who appreciated him instead of constantly criticizing him for it. I followed them out to the parking lot, not because I had any kind of plan, but because I literally couldn't make myself stop watching. I saw Robert load groceries into a car that wasn't his. Clearly comfortable and settled in this new life he built without me. The woman said something that made him laugh, really laugh, in a way I hadn't heard in months before our separation. As they drove away together, I stood in that parking lot feeling like I'd been completely destroyed. Robert wasn't miserable without me. He wasn't regretting his decision or missing our relationship even a little bit. He was absolutely thriving, living his best life with someone who wanted the same things he did. And I was alone, bitter, and finally starting to understand what I'd actually lost. The divorce was finalized 6 months after Robert first brought up separation. By then, his relationship with the new woman was clearly serious and committed, and my increasingly desperate attempts to reconcile had become pathetic and embarrassing. I'd shown up at his apartment unannounced multiple times, called him crying in the middle of the night, and even tried to get his friends to talk to him about giving me another chance. Nothing worked because Robert was completely and totally done with me and everything about our relationship. He'd moved on in every way that mattered, and I was left trying to figure out how to build a life without him. The worst part was that I still didn't really understand what had gone wrong or how to avoid making the same mistakes again. Now, a year later, I'm still single and still angry about how everything played out. I see updates on social media about Robert and his girlfriend looking happy and successful together, and it makes me physically sick. They went to Europe together last month, something Robert and I had talked about doing for years but never managed to plan. She gets the version of Robert that I helped create, the one who learned from our relationship and became a better partner because of it. Meanwhile, I'm stuck explaining to potential dates why my marriage ended, trying to find someone who will understand that I wasn't being unreasonable when I asked for boundaries and basic respect. But every time I tell the story, I can see the confusion in their eyes, the same confusion I saw in my friends and family when I tried to explain the situation. I know Robert is probably telling people that I was impossible to please, that nothing he did was ever good enough, that I made him feel unwanted and unappreciated in his own marriage. But that's not the complete story. He's conveniently leaving out the part where he objectified me, made me feel uncomfortable in my own home. He's forgetting that I asked for respect and he chose to interpret that as total rejection. Robert got to walk away from our marriage and start fresh with all the lessons I taught him about what women really want and need from a relationship. But I'm the one who's truly free now, free from a relationship where I was constantly made to feel uncomfortable and objectified by someone who was supposed to love and protect me. That's what I keep telling myself, anyway. And most days, I almost believe it's actually true.